even if you can only get a meter, you still can detect a burial because the burial shaft.
Yeah.
And that's usually what you pick up is the shaft. They collapse. You don't really pick up anything there. But you can pick up something from the burial shaft. So.
Is he going to back up in his room? Yeah. Put him in my office.
Two, check, 1, 2, check, check. Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2, check, check, check. 1, 2, testing 1, 2, check, check, check. 1, 2, check. Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. 2. Testing 1, 2. Test, test, test. That's better. Check 1, 2. Test, test. Testing 1, 2. 1, 2. Check, check. Testing 1, 2. Check. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Test. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. That's good.
Good afternoon. Well, we're back in business, so I'd like to invite the Rossville School Committee up here and say a few words about their involvement with this project, and that's Reverend Moore, Reverend Swanson, Darlene Osborne, Regina Appetigan, who else was on? Ida McKay. And like I said earlier, we have a support group here, the MKO Mobile Crisis Response Team, that are here as a support. If you could stand up when I call your name so people will know who you are. Teresa Henderson. Oh, there she is. Chris Chubb. Michelle Mainville. And Trudy Stevenson. So those are the MKO Mobile Crisis Response Team. And Norway House Cree Nation Wellness, if you can give me your names too. So who's the first speaker here? Darlene Osborne.
Danse, du temak, that miskati na. Ni gana biggest gone because I'm the youngest in Tigawin. I feel so proud of that. Usually, I had to write something down last night because this special project that we're doing means a lot to me, and it's very dear to me due to the people that I know in the past. On May 28, Canada and the world learned of the heartbreaking news of the 215 children buried in an unmarked mass grave in Kamloops, British Columbia. Since then, hundreds, thousands more also had been found. It was a young anthropologist who found the mass graves that she had discovered the unmarked graves. God bless the young anthropologist. Each of those children had a loving family. They came from a caring community. Today, the communities mourn their losses. A loss of a child that began when they were removed from their homes. And we can relate to that as well, because a lot of our children were removed. They were forced to go to school. A loss that grew heavier every day. That child did not return home. A child that will continue to carry forward for all families, communities, and residential school survivors, as we still have much to do with this work, because this was wrong, what they did to our children. Today, First Nations communities across the country, we mourn with the families, we grieve. We have a lot of emotions, anger, frustrations, because there's no answers. I often think how terrible it must have been for the children. Why would anyone be so cruel to hurt an innocent child? There was no one to protect them, no one to love them, or no one to care for them. It saddens me a great deal because I can relate to that. My biological mother and my uncle William Miller were both raised in a residential school. They lived there most of their childhood years. They lived there 13 to 15 years of their lives. I understand now today why my biological mother couldn't raise me, because of the things that she went through in residential school. And I'm so grateful that an elder came to me, and it was her friend. She told me that they were forbidden not to say anything. They weren't even allowed to show their emotions or to talk about anything. That is the reason why a lot of our survivors today don't say anything. A lot of them passed already without even telling their stories. And that saddens me. This is when Indigenous leaders got together and they demand the government to help search for unmarked graves after the discovery of the 215 children. Many of the First Nations communities had the ground-penetrating radar search already. Many of them are still waiting for the results. And we will be waiting as well. But we're so used to that. We're very patient people. We're very kind people. We're very caring people. And we will continue to find the truth for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. Kana wi ka tsekiswino taisinagiskagik animisoino. Agi pesinagiskagik kayas. Kin nigi gumawak minagimusomin nanak o kuminanak. Today, we are gathered here together to do that GPR in our community. It's pretty scary what to expect. We talked about that. So whatever the outcome will be, we will ask the Creator to guide us, to help us. And I humbly ask Norway House and other people to continue praying for our community and other Indigenous communities. We don't know what to expect. We don't know how we're going to feel. But I know, standing here, it's very hard. And I know we had 2 residential schools here in our community, and a lot of things that happen to our people. We don't know, but we heard stories about it. I heard stories about it from my late sisters and my late brother. They're not very good stories. A lot of people are angry, They blame the churches. They blame the people. People have different feelings. People have different emotions. But I know in my heart, I know my dear mother is up there with her loved ones. It is my duty now to take care of myself and my children. No sima Kristo, minaini no akota. Kinano ega kita tuskewin no. Kana wigat segusi taisitawin na muaya kawiyak tapero tagoyak. Tapigit timahat kitsawasi misinana. Kinana ne makita tuskewin nawaga. Kinano. Kuwana sonawana waknegi. Apigis kinaumaat kawasa. Kani gusikay sinagito migats. Dati siminenta kikitsawasi misinanak. Kimistete na naspitsuta kinoseisipik. Misatigipaman. I'd like to thank the former Councillor James Dixon, who had started this very important work. And now it's Councillor David Swanson for leading this special project now. Thank you to the committee members for your knowledge, your understanding, love, and respect in being very supportive in this initiative. And I'm very grateful for that. Thank you for the firekeepers that looked after the sacred fire. Thank you for the young women that danced. Thank you for the women and men that sang and blessed the grounds. Thank you very much. Thank you to the traditional knowledge keeper, Gordy Walker, for the ceremony this morning. And thank you to the Chief and Council for your support. And especially thank you to you people, that we will stand together and that to let our prayers be taken up there, that our prayers will be honored, that our prayers will be heard by the Creator, that we will work together, we will love each other and take care of each other. Kinanas komite na.
Negusi, Darlene is our former councillor. Darlene Osborne, kinanas komitin kapisi ayamihiyagan ursago kati tostawan go Rina Apetaigan. Our next speaker will be Rina Apetaigan.
Good afternoon. I thank you all for coming. I especially thank our Creator, our Heavenly Father, who is still with us in spirit, helping us how to speak. I didn't write anything down. I'll just speak as the Spirit leads me. First, I'm very thankful being here. I was thankful when I was asked to be in a residential school committee. I try my best to get involved. I'm not an educated person. I only went up to grade 6. But I'm thankful for this. This is the day that the Lord has made. But I pray that nothing. You know, and if we do magamina, that they will find us more together and stronger. My mother was in a residential school here in Norway House. And my late father, my late dad worked at the residential school in Cross Lake. I remember when I was a little girl, that last residential school in Cross Lake. Munamaga, we didn't go to school there. We were just across where we lived. And there were a lot of Ayag from inland, different High school which and I never once heard my dad to talk about anything. Only my mom said that they used to have the way they were fed is because she didn't like it. But she never talked about abuse. We nice at that diet. Not that I told that. They were helping each other, I guess, supporting each other. The ones that he was with is how we stayed at school. And on that day, when I heard about that 215, I was crushed in my mind, my heart. Niki matun, ekite makita entamana I was stuck. Even though I was a kayasisa, but still Gian crushed me. Especially afterwards, when they was blaming. Especially the Roman Catholic. Because I am a Roman Catholic minister. But I called on the Lord. And I asked him. And I remember my mom's words and my dad. Ikanik. Said I remember that. And then when I went to Edmonton, that's when my healing journey started. When I went for that papal visit, when a Pope was there, I was there for 8 days, every day. That's when my healing journey started. I almost stepped down from what I was doing. But then, at that moment, I was sitting way up at the stadium. I heard a voice talking to me. That was the second time the voice called me. The first time I was called to become a lay minister. And this was the second time that voice don't punta. You're going to get through this. Your nation will get through this. Eko tangi peten forgiveness. Eko ta. Ginatawi kuisin eko sa semak. And I started thinking, what we can do. And there were a lot of people, over 6,000 people, 600,000 people in that stadium. And when the Pope said, it's apology. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of joy, Mina. And there was a lot of, it was so powerful. In all those places we were with him, where he was Ayusa. And when I came back, I told my children, the Roman Catholic Church blame. Just ignore it. It's not only us, it was different ones. I said, this was long time ago. But it still hurts, I said. Just keep praying. That's what I told them. But Mom, we don't want. Yeah, well, I'm not the one that was there, I said, and I'm not, Even the Holy Father, I said, he's 85-year-old, he wasn't there that time, I said. So just look at it that way. I told them. And then, eko tautse, niminen tenisa. Anuts, kaisa papetawake when we had those meetings. That's one thing I never lost was my language nista. You know, kape, ekauchi university school, minekekotente utsi school yak, akiyak. I never lost my language, and that's why I'm using my language today. Ako maka, nanas ko mo nisa. You know, it's going to be hard these few days. But we'll just hope and pray, keep praying. And minaku, kagiruta na awante. Ite kaino chichiketsu go if you want, you know, to go and see, to go and support them. We support and we help. We have to support our leaders. I support Dave Swanson. I thank you for asking me to be in this committee. Mina, I support all the leaders of Norway House. I always did, even the former ones. Muna kaya kwan. Ako hindi na makapeke Hispanic, you know. They'll be blame all the time. But that does not blame each other. Just hope to the Lord. And to bind us together, tamama wiyak. I never mind other beliefs nista. Niwitsaka pa isto, pukuite niwitsaka nista. Eko sise. Mistay nga pa tene ko ite kakitotian for that 1 week in Edmonton. Different kinds. Even Anita, when it was so powerful. Even young people dancing in with their jingle dresses and different stuff. When they put that address on a pope, ito ni kiyaw, isukatan. Even Anita, that's where my healing started when I went there. Ako anots, ni mas kay kapoin. Minang ay ko mas kay kapoin nista ketisi nakiskamak. Umakakatot si katik. Ketisi ayaki sa kekwan, but we're hoping nista and praying that ekakekwan sa miskikatik kusis. Kuyani man, you need us. There's people kaito at sikuke that you can talk to if you need to talk to somebody. I'm available too if somebody needs to talk to me nista. Ako magananas ko man sa ko pokosit today. Mina a few days come that we have to support each other. Not just to go to places where we're asked to go when there's a prizes or whatever, tour prizes. Come as you are. Kasi ko takit ti kay nano. Muna na po kaya kwantay ka kaya. Di pa ko isiyak when we go and help somebody. And that's how I am in my ministry. I don't get paid for nothing. I don't get paid nothing. It's just me. Nista isa volunteer ngayton. I am commissioned and mandated as a minister, but I don't get nothing. I don't get paid. One day, when I finish nista my life, I'll probably get my reward someday. Ako maka, you know, the children are so precious too. We have to tell our children, our grandchildren, egata pagitsiak. Taita mo ako. Minatay ko iwitsiak to try and make them understand. Not to be mad, not to be angry, like I was nista. Because he went then, yan maka. I'm thinking of my parents too. You know what they told me, nista. Never to hold a grudge against anybody, no matter what happens. Kamananas kumani sa okay we start tagaya ikapidutik and to help one another, to pray for each other, to pray for our community. Minaw kika petutagi ko menu that the Lord will bless them and lead them, guide them with to kapesi siwa kukura in our community. Eko pugawit yan is today. Nanas kumit na kan tutawik. Thank you.
Ako si Rina. Ako keti amigo ya kay Aida Make.
I'm going to remain sitting down because gusto ko yung tenoma this topic. Sige man, Mr. Higgy para miskagawa. Nas kumagisa man to. Umawas siya nas kagisigag. Hispanic itagipe vichevit tagok. Tagipe vichiviana pishis. Nakina kita tamiskad na minaganda tamay. Manaweh tanong man tatus kewenan kagis minagawiak. Our community has a history of the residential school era and its impact on our people. The residential school system was established as part of the assimilation policies of the governments of the day. We've all heard that. The churches entered into agreements with those same governments to run schools. Our community had residential schools and day schools operated by the United Church of Canada, Church of England Day School with the Anglican Church at Jack River and Towers Island, Jack River and Neckaway School with the Roman Catholic. Now the churches face the challenge of restoring relationships shredded by this terrible legacy. And all of us have inherited this legacy, although many of us were not personally or directly part of the residential school era. It is important to understand what happened. The fact remains that many children are harmed terribly by abuse they suffered while in these institutions. I was educated at the Rossville Residential School from 1957 to 1967. The school was operated by the United Church of Canada. Two of my aunties stayed at this residential school, as well as my cousins and friends. My brothers and sisters also attended this residential school as day students. My father worked as a night watchman for the residential school. He would hear the children crying when he made his rounds. I went to school with the residential school students that lived in the school. They came from northern Manitoba reserves, which included Nelson House, Shamattawa, God's Lake, God's Narrows, Oxford House, Garden Hill, Wasekamac, Red Sucker Lake, and it also included some Norway House students. I met some of them in another institution when attending high school. The residential school operated the residential school at Rossville operated from 1899 to 1967. It is important to understand what happened and what we as a community can be supportive and how as a community we can be supportive to the residential school survivors and their families, which spans 2 to 3 generations. Intergenerational or multi-generational trauma happens when the effects of trauma are not resolved in one generation. When trauma is ignored and there is no support for dealing with it, the trauma will be passed from one generation to the next. What we learned to see as normal when we were children, we pass it on to our own children. There are many of us out there that know the layout of the community during that era. So I asked those people that know the layout of that area there by the residential school, people that lived around that area, share the knowledge that you have with the people that are going to be, at the table when they're doing the crown shirts. Talk to them, give them that information, and it will help with the work ahead of us. This is a huge task, and it's just a beginning. Misama at Tuskewin. Yanamutama, the Pisco Hennegohe, and Misaka, Gabit mistake on the Rutskate. Egiskenta meguma utegi egiastego, Misteta Egiskenta momentum and Amavaganamutam. We all know the issues of that we have in the community are as a result of the trauma that was experienced in these schools, and it was passed on to the next generations. But what I think about mostly is when I went to this residential school, the children that were there, like they must have been 5 years old, 5, 6 years old. Me, I had, I could go home. I could go home at the end of the school day. I had my parents, my grandparents, I had my family. And I had that foundation, that knowledge, that indigenous knowledge that was passed down to me by my parents. And I had that way of life that I know was good for me. Like the way of life that we had our own medicine people. We had our own midwives, our own shamans, our own experts. When we also were taught like the sacredness of a woman because of that, the ability to bear that life. The Creator gave that gift to the woman. So I knew that growing up, and I knew to respect my mother, my grandmothers, all the women. And that was taught to my brothers by my dad. And so we had that knowledge that was passed on to us. And that was the spirituality of our people back then. That indigenous knowledge. And you've heard Gordy talk about it this morning. That's what he was talking about, that knowledge that we had before we entered these schools. Like we were self-sufficient. We knew the medicines. I didn't see the hospital till I was 13 years old. My mom was my medicine person, my healer. So our people had those gifts. They were sacred spiritual gifts. So like the teaching that we had, I know that's what sustained me in my experience, in the residential school. I know that's what sustained me because I knew who I was, and I knew my way of life was very important to me, despite what I was told, despite being called down as a human being. I knew who I was. I guess I had that inner strength because of that work ethic that was instilled in us, because we had to work in order to survive. And so when I talk about about our way of life. I share that with the children at school, so they know that we had our own way of life, so they know that we had those gifts and we had those strengths and we had those medicine people and we had those special people that looked after us, and we still have our medicine people. And Gordon, when Gordy was talking about going back to ceremonies, we had those ceremonies. Now we're going back to them. So that's reclaiming, that's decolonization, reclaiming our history, reclaiming what we had, you know, and I guess when you want to talk about decolonization, that's what it's about. You're reclaiming your culture and your way of life. So when we talk to the kids at school, to the students, we work there as Gehteyek. That's what we share. We want the kids to know the positive things that we had. And we want them to know that we are a proud people. That's why our community, we really had strong leaders in the past. That's why we are progressive. And we want our students to keep moving forward with that in mind, you know, to carry on the work that was done by our strong leaders. And to work as a collective, to work for the good of all in the community. And that's what we teach in the school. And that's important to me, you know, to continue that kind of work. I guess because of this residential school experience, we don't want our children to ever encounter any of that. We want that to stop, you know, and we know that, you know, when you see Cindy, you know, fighting for the children, for the rights of the children, you know that fight, we always have to fight for something. There's no other people other than Aboriginal people that have to fight to keep, you know, to reclaim and to keep what they have, to protect their waters, to protect their environment. So this is all I wanted to share, and I think if people have knowledge about, you know, about that residential school era, I know a lot of young people don't know about that, but I know there are still residential school survivors in the community that can help us out. So I just want to encourage people that know about that history to come forward and talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Egersan. I appreciate Mustayagista. Agogatiamigano, I have Emigima Gordon Swanson. Our next speaker is Reverend Gordon Swanson.
Power. Thank you very much. And then, no, I intend to be here to be able part of the of this committee, to be able to share what I have to the community and to the people. And what you heard by these ladies is very powerful. Because the reason why is you women carry a child for 9 months. How you feel towards that feeling. Because I've been around four provinces in northern areas. during my ministry as an archdeacon and also as a priest. And I've seen a lot pain that people had to carry. And I seen, doing some workshops around, I've seen elders crying, women, because of their children, what has gone wrong with them. They never understood what was wrong. They didn't want to hear their kids telling them the truth about what residential school was about and how they were treated. And they said, Munisa, Munigo sa katutago okay, making magiti at that time. And that was the thing for them, to be able to try to get rid of us a lot. That's what they said. And then just like calluses that you have in your hands, it miskaina pugegon, nistam kimustan, kita kimustan nistam. And that's probably how these people were, but they were trained, whatever they want to do to us natives. And then later on in the years, they were able to do whatever they wanted to. That was part of the training they had. No, and then and even a lot of times when I come into the community, I see these younger people and older than I am. You know, they walk around me, or they stop at their track and then walk away. Who I was to them, a minister that hurt them, that were hurt in these residential school. And then that was something I've seen, and the pain the elders carried in their communities, in their lives. They carried this in their lives. And a lot of these died, it was easy, without having that peace, without knowing what really happened in to their children. Many of them that has never came back. A lot of them talked. Many of them did not talk. So this is something that's very important to be able to start as a healing journey for us. They're very powerful in your words, and then admire them. That's the way my mother was. She was very strong in her beliefs to raise us, to be able to give us the support, you know, but yet not knowing what went through in schools with us. My brother and I, late Victor, went through a lot, even day school, provincial schools. We went through a lot. If we told our parents, we were threatened to be, to be killed. And that was one of the things that we had to carry with us through the years of our lives as growing up. Scared all the time, scary. I didn't know my body used to shake a lot. I couldn't breathe. I never knew what that was. That was anxiety before I knew. And I had to carry that for many years. And we try to let this thing go, but we must work together for it. Who we are as a nation. To forgive, it's hard. But if we work together, if we cry together, it's okay. That'll lift us up. So whatever people that hear us talk here today, they come forward. The journey that we're going to go through, I'm going to go through that. they're going to help me if they tell their stories and I tell them my stories. I'll be able to heal because there's something in me that is crying out. Agwan gawichi kognista nige. Gawichi haognista. You know, by the grace of God, I was brought into this ministry to be able to do something, to help people. I have a lot of dreams that people are sometimes, but these dreams are true, but I don't tell them all. You know, the true God that we're going to be using His name to walk with us, His Spirit. I heard God call my name, Piako, when I came into the ministry. He said, Gordon, I was ready to go to sleep. My body leaped about a foot high, and my body started to shake. That's the power of the one who calls to serve you, to be served. And it can be done. Tagihin uma kahit mamit tanin tama kahit tay siyaya. Monegat tay Paul in Ephesians mas naigat yo. By the wealth and the glory of God it yo. Tagihi kuma to call on Him. Tagiyak to give that inner peace in ourselves to be able to walk together. It is talk, it mistay mas na to unity, to become a unity, to become as who we are. Taihin. Igata gusta mak to step forward. Just to continue who we are. See, God made, when He first made us, He made an image of them, who we are to be. Because we are very special. Each person, any denomination, any race, God sees them. God has a special gift to them, the Spirit that He gave. We can heal together as we walk together. I was going to share a little story about my nephew, very special, but I don't think I'll do it. But you know, it's good to share laughter and penaskaw. It can be a together. Do you want to hear it? Okay. There was one time we went out hunting, and then some of us, and then we took my special nephew here, very special to me, and then he's in a crowd. And we went, and then we got to where we were going. So we get here. Name is Dennis. Gave him bow and arrow. You go see, let's see what you can find out there. Let's see how it is. We'll wait here and then we'll get everything ready. So he went. Sometime later, he came back. By the way, this is a joke. And then he came, and then she said we were hunting, trying to hunt moose and deer. I go near him. I tell him, well, what happened? I got one. On top later on, have some tea and eat first before I tell him. You must be tired. Just wait, you walk down the mitsahonan. Then you want to tip mittig. Where's your bow and arrow, Gitana? No, I left it over there. Where the deer is. So we went closer, but it started to look different. This deer started to look different. We got closer. the bow and arrow was on top of this animal. Kana up ma a donkey at Saganyo, but so that's a story, make you laugh and it can hear me lift, give you a lift in there. So that's Dennis, and I always said jokes with him and share jokes. I say, God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Egersani, Reverend Swanson. Our next speaker is Reverend Moore.
He took my power. I won't take long. Lots has been said already, but since we started this, we had a lot of meetings. We sat together. How do we go about this? I know there's going to be a lot of emotions. Will be coming up like triggers of what happened in a residential school system. But all through that, right now, today, our helper is here with us. So I truly believe in that. Creator God, He's here with us. He's our helper. I was called on His work back in 1998. And I didn't know. And I didn't know what was up ahead. But that day when Creator called me to do His work, that was the greatest day. That was the first time I ever felt peace in my life. So that is still out there, whoever that needs that gift that comes from Creator Himself. It is still with us. It is still within reach. It is still within reach. So God called me and ordained me to be His servant. When 2:15 came out, when I heard that they have found 215 graves, I was mad that day. I wanted to hit somebody. That's how mad I was. And there were no crosses on those graves saying, "Here lies the beloved disciple of this child." There was no names. There was no crosses on those graves. I was really upset with that. And though I serve this God, I serve Jesus Christ, the one that went to the cross for each and every one that is sitting here. But there were no crosses on those graves. I serve a church that did teach to these little children. I put in my resignation. I don't want to work with that church no more. I handed in my resignation. The elder came to me and he said, "Lawrence, you did not do these things to those children or those people. God called you to serve Him. When He called you that day, all those schools, residential schools, were already closed." That's what He said. So over the years in this service that I've been doing, I sat with residential school survivors, meeting with their lawyers, trying to get their compensation. And they tell horrific stories of what happened to them. I went to the residential school system also. I know how it feels to get slapped right across the face. I know how it feels to get your hair pulled by the one that is in charge, that probably did not like the way I was speaking. So those are That's where I came from. But by the grace of God, I'm still here today. So he is still my helper today. And if I see tomorrow, he'll still be my helper. So that's the direction that I'm pointing out to them. That the higher power. Back then, when I was still out in the world, I heard about this higher power being mentioned, but I did not understand what that was. Today, I understand what that means now. So that's where our hope lies with him. If there were graves found out there, I know there will be anger. Maganos kagishiga. Kama mishina no wana ga meget match. Ego de wat na mamaskawishi. Miada mest mo hoganiga. Aniga giswenta hek ketena nuskenegate ne gotehwa. Miada ge no stedne ko ma metona ischigano. That's all I want to say today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Moore. And this is our Rossville School Committee. Let's give them a warm round of applause for the powerful stories they've shared. Thank you. So, once again, the supporters that are here, counselors, we have from the Health Division, Lucy Miswigan, Sarah Match, Joni Miswigan, Leonard Duncan, Gordon Moore, and April Osborne. Those are the support workers. If you need to talk to somebody, they're there, and we also have the MKO Crisis Response Team. So do you want to move right into the Stantec presentation? Where's my agenda? So we have Stantec. They're going to talk about the process, the scope of work, the timelines, the results and interpretation. There'll be a question and answer period. So if you have any questions, you'll have that opportunity to ask them, and then we have a demonstration right here, happening right here, right after the presentation. Then the feast, we have to go back down the bank. Too much work to haul everything up here, so that is the plan. So if you want to take it away there, young man, here's the microphone.
Thank you very much. I haven't been called a young man in quite a long time, but oh, okay. Let's talk about James. That's right. Thank you for welcoming us to your community. We really appreciate it. Thanks to the elders and to Chief and Council, Loretta and Dave, who have done all this work organizing our opportunity to be here to help. I'll tell you a little bit about us, and then James is going to talk more about the technical aspects of a ground-penetrating radar study and geophysics. Just to let you know a little bit about who we are, Maria, who's back there, there's Maria Mampi, and James Hulsabosh. Maria's an archaeologist, and James is a geoscientist. I'm an archaeologist. I've been an archaeological consultant for 36 years now, and I've been working in unmarked grave studies for about 30 of those years. We started applying geophysics, remote sensing, to finding unmarked graves in the early 90s, and as you can see by the equipment we have here, it gets more and more sophisticated all the time. But I've had the honor and the privilege of working with elders over the years, and and I've learned that that the process of taking on one of these studies is we have three things that we're here to do. The first thing to do is to listen. Did I just, oh, there we go. I cut out for a second. We're here to listen to what the community wants us to do and direct our actions. The second thing is for us to provide support and assistance in any way we can with such things as archival studies, interviews, and reporting, gathering the information and putting it into a report format. And perhaps the most significant thing that we provide is the technical ability to conduct geophysical surveys. It takes a long time to learn how to do this stuff. The input in the financial input into having the up-to-date equipment is pretty high, so that's the one thing that we can really help out with a lot. But we try to keep in mind that we are here to help out. We're not leading anything here. We're here to listen to you. We're here to answer your questions. We're available. We want you to know what we're capable of doing, what we're not capable of doing. And in that regard, I think what we will do is move into into the PowerPoint presentation. I don't think we're using any examples from residential schools, though, are we, James? One of the things we don't do is talk about other residential schools. It's not our story to tell. We have worked on other residential schools, but we don't use photographs or data from other residential school studies because it's not for us to tell. We do not talk to the news media about this, and we don't even share information that we learn with our colleagues at Stantec unless they're part of the project. So it's completely something that we do and try to stay completely anonymous about and leave it to the community to share their story if they wish to do that. So James, I'll hand this off to you.
Okay. Hi everyone. As Butch said, my name is James. I have been doing geophysics for a little over 20 years now in various capabilities, and lately I've been doing a lot of work with Butch in residential schools and other projects where we're looking for burial sites and so on. Currently though, I'm just going to give you all a bit of a brief overview of how these geophysical surveys work. It's not too technical, just kind of a basic approach for everyone to understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it. So we are using two different techniques. One is the GPR, and which is the wheeled cart there. The other is the electromagnetics, which is the orange equipment there, and I'll do a little demo later, but for now we'll just go through the slides and I'll just kind of give you some background on them. So geophysical surveys, something like an X-ray machine, and so it's nice when you don't want to dig up everything. In some cases you don't want to dig up anything, and it provides an opportunity to give you a glimpse of what's underground without having to dig it up. The specialized equipment, which is what we have over here, transmits energy to the ground, and the response is measured from the ground to a receiver, and this collected data is mapped with GPS, and in the end we end up with basically we have data points that are known locations, and using that we can create colored maps with that. So let's start with ground penetrating radar, so or GPR. So you all know of radar from you know, World War II movies and so on. Essentially, radar is just an electromagnetic impulse travels out, and then it reflects off of objects that have different density. So if you think of the airplane analogy, it's the same technology, it's just bouncing off of an airplane and back to a receiver. In this case, however, this impulse is sent into the ground, and then it bounces off of differing objects in the ground. And similar to what light does when it encounters water. So when you see, see a sunset, that water is reflecting that light back to you. So it's the same principle where when energy hits a material of a different density, it tends to reflect. Some goes in, some reflects. And so that's essentially what you get back is a reflection from the ground that is picked up and then gives information about the size and depth of the material that it's essentially reflecting off in the ground. And these objects that it reflects off are typically referred to as anomalies. So GPR has some very good uses. It's a very safe and low impact technology. Detects metal, non-metal objects, voids, underground irregularities, changes in lithology. For example, like from a grave shaft, it can pick up, a rectangular feature there, even if there's no casket or remains present. You can get the dimensions of the targets, and once again, no disturbance is necessary. They're just a non-intrusive way to assess the subsurface. Like any of these things, it's not perfect though. It can't detect organic matter, so it can't differentiate, say, like if you are looking for the remains of a human, you cannot pick that up. It has limited exploration depth, and that can be modified somewhat based on what kind of antenna you use and a few other factors, but it is also limited by the lithology of the ground. So for example, if you have heavy clay soil, it tends to absorb a lot of that energy, and you can't go as deep. If it's salty ground, if you're like near the ocean, or there's a number of places where ground is quite salty, it is essentially opaque and you can't see through that. It also can't see through metal. So those are some limitations there. Another limitation is the resolution of it. So the deeper you go, the larger the object has to be for you to see it. So like at surface with this, I can see rebar in the ground, like this big. But if I go deeper, I'm not going to be able to see that. Essentially, well, it says up there, a GPR target must be about 10% the size of the target depth to be seen. So in other words, if you're down 60 centimeters, that object has 6 centimeters in diameter to be seen. So people often ask, can you see bones? Well, at surface you could see a bone, but at the depth of a typical burial we don't see bones. We just see generally just a rectangular anomaly that looks like typical of a grave. Can't see through metal. I already mentioned that. A big thing too is GPR, one of its biggest limitations is that GPR has to be on absolutely flat ground all the time. So you can see that sled at the bottom there, that's the antenna. And if that's not touching the ground, you are essentially not getting a good signal. So it's pretty finicky. If you have even snow cover, it's a problem. If you are going over rocks and so on, and it just doesn't work. So it is definitely limited in that respect. All right, so our other tool of choice is electromagnetics, inductive electromagnetics. And as the name implies there, so when you induce something, you're creating something in something else. So in this case, Butch, dreaming over there. So essentially, that orange thing there, it has a transmitter. It's really simple. It's actually just a string of wires. And just like all the wires in all buildings that carry current, it's an AC current. And whenever you have an AC current, it actually has an electromagnetic field around it. So in all our homes, everywhere we are, there are electromagnetic fields. In theory, they're harmless. I mean, the sun projects them all the time to Earth. We're constantly bathed in electromagnetic fields. The difference here is it's a controlled electromagnetic field. And so anything within that electromagnetic field that can conduct electricity, then a current is generated in that. So you can kind of see an example here where this is the, I mean, it's a model, right? But this is the instrument sending out its electromagnetic field. There's something in the ground that conducts electricity. Electrical current is generated in here, which then creates another electromagnetic field, which is picked up by a receiver. And the difference in strength between those gives you an idea of the conductivity of the ground, which is the ability for it to conduct electricity. And this is going to vary based on metal. Metal is a very good conductor of electricity. Also salts. So like absolutely pure water doesn't conduct electricity, whereas salt water does quite well. Organics, it will pick up organics, increased organics. And so, it also measures magnetic susceptibility, which is more to do with kind of an pure archaeology, pardon me, like looking for ancient sites. It can pick up where a fire hundreds of years ago on the ground, for example, because it creates minerals that are magnetic. Or it can pick up field stones that are used to build a house or something like that. So it can pick up some really unique things like that. It's not super useful when we're looking for burials, but it can also, that being said, sometimes decaying organics create magnetic minerals that can be picked up. And it also helps detect any metal that might have been associated with a casket or something like that. That being said, we're talking about very small things at a depth, and again, it is also limited in its depth of penetration, so that EM38 over there is limited to about 1.5 meters, which is about 5 feet. It's the orange one over there. Yep. 5 feet. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and generally what we're looking for is a grave shaft. And same with the GPR. It's limited in its depth as well. In clay soil, it might be as little as a meter. In sandy soil, it could be deeper. But anytime you have a wooden casket and any human remains in there, they're going to be long gone. Essentially, there's not going to be a void, and so you can't really pick up anything there. There's not much there to pick up. So you're actually detecting when they dig the shaft and they put the soil back in, it's not in the same order as it was originally, and so what the GPR actually picks up is just changes in density. So it can pick up that just subtle changes in density and just get little reflections off that. It's sometimes it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around. I've been trying to come up with a good analogy for that still, but I'm not there yet. Okay. Oh. Right. Yep. No. Sure. Are you talking about with the GPR or the EM38? The EM38? Okay. Well, we'll be using both, and I'm about to get to that actually, but I can answer your question right now. I'll do a demo later, but the EM38 has a readout on it. So as I'm walking, I am always looking at that readout, and I can see when there's a change in the subsurface. And if it's a negative response, like if it has a negative reading, that means there's a strong metal presence under the ground. If it tends to be higher and positive, that could be other things too. A lot of it is just experience, you know, as I go, and then I'll maybe go over it a few times. For example, if you go over something and you think it's metal and you turn it sideways and it changes dramatically, that means it is metal for sure. If it doesn't, then that means it's not metal. So there's things like that, little tricks you can do that help determine that. The GPR, you do see real-time data there. The issue is that before GPR data is useful, it tends to require a lot of post-processing. There's a lot of interference that happens. There's ringing. So, for example, when I ran it here, there's a layer of concrete, and so it encounters that density. But under here, there's a layer of gravel, probably, or something like that. And that's such a dramatic change in density that it's like almost like it reflects, and so you get ringing, and so you get layers and layers of data that obscure what you're actually looking for, and so you have to filter all that stuff out later. So it's actually quite time-consuming, GPR processing. Whereas the EM is very fast. I can download that data, and within hours I can show you a map of where I've encountered metal, where there's plumes of maybe salinity or foundations. And so it's great as a preliminary tool to go out and map out an area and find features that we're looking for, but also features that indicate that we shouldn't even be bothered doing GPR there, because if there's a big area full of metal, well, there's not going to be any graves there, or if there are, we're not going to be able to see them anyways because of the metal. So it's a good first step to find out what's there, and also find out areas where it wouldn't be useful to be doing GPR, because GPR is so time consuming. If there's an area that you know you don't have to do, well, you're saving my time and your time and money. So does that answer your question? Okay, good. I don't have to read the last two slides now.
What's the timeline in terms of you're able to tell something that anomaly that
with the GPR? With the EM38, it's pretty quick. Like, really, go and do a survey that night. I can have the data processed and a map made, and you know, basically by the next day, say, hey, there's a landfill here, or there's a foundation here, or something like that. GPR is a little more time consuming. I tend to work shorter days when I do GPR in the field, and then spend 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours in the evening doing processing, just to get to the point where I'm comfortable with making some basic interpretations. But it's a very finicky and difficult process, though. But it is good at what it does. It takes a little bit longer. It'd be more like on the order of, the EM would be hours, the GPR is typically days. So. Yeah. Oh, just go back actually a second. I'll show you. You can just hit the arrows on the keyboard too, I think. So just to show you here, these are two different types. Yeah, I'm not good. I've never used a mic before. I'm a mic virgin. So this up here is actually was a salt spill, and so you can see in the high area there, there's a brine line that carried brine from oil and gas, and it spilled and ran down and pooled in this oil field area. This, on the other hand, is a buried tractor, and you can see there's quite a bit of a difference in how they show up. this is actually the magnetic susceptibility detection here. And so old tractors are made of metal, iron, so they are very magnetically susceptible. And so you can see there's two applications for the EM38. So just wanted to kind of point those out. Yeah, so EM survey, it detects a wide range of materials, so it'll pick up any metal. Like anything that conducts electricity. I mean, ideally you'd find some gold, but that hasn't happened yet to my knowledge. But it's great for finding landfills and buried debris under the ground, because it'll pick up all of that stuff, and it's very obvious in your data. It also picks up organics if there are high concentrations. It picks up changes in soil texture, so clay versus sand, the differences in soil moisture, and like I was already saying as well, data is quick turnaround, and so it makes it fairly cost effective. Again, it's non-intrusive. One big advantage of it, though, as I said, the GPR has to be in contact with the ground at all times. The EM38 is carried, and so you have a bit more flexibility in terms of where you can walk and what kind of terrain you use it on. And it's just, overall it's faster. It's a good way you can go in and it's 10 times faster than a GPR, so you can go in and get some good data initially and help plan your GPR. A question that's often asked, maybe not by you folks, but the EM equipment cannot detect hydrocarbons, so it can't pick up oil or anything like that. If it did, it would be a very useful thing, but it doesn't provide good resolution. And here you can kind of see, this is from a site that we did, and you can see some vague outlines of things, but it's not what you'd call detailed. It takes a bit of a practiced eye to know what you're looking at there. And so that is kind of a disadvantage, is that I guess to explain that, magnetic fields are big and loose. And when you apply electricity to them, they change shape. I kind of wish I could see them, but I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's almost like a slinky or something, where like when you push it, it moves out a different way, and so you end up with these strange shapes quite often. So what you're really picking up is the invisible electromagnetic fields that are all around you. So that's what it's measuring. And so they're not neat and tidy. Like GPR tends to produce neat and tidy, distinct objects. This does not. Depth of exploration, as I said, about 5 feet, 1.5 meters. It's difficult to determine the depth of objects. You can kind of guess, but it's just a guess. I mean, I can say like, well, it's about half a meter to a meter deep or something like that. Whereas GPR, you can really pinpoint the depth quite well. It does not work well near metal. So if you are to try and survey near a chain link fence, you don't even bother. What you're doing is you're inducing a current in that fence, and then it's just saturating your signal, and you get nothing out of it. Or concrete with rebar. I don't know if they put rebar in rinks. I guess we'll find out, but if there's rebar in here, yeah, we would not be able to detect anything. So, next slide. So basically I've already said this, but yeah, so EM is a good first step to assessing a site. It quickly locates large-scale features, landfills, just all kinds of big features, maybe foundations, debris under the ground. And once we know that, like I said, we know that we can't do a GPR there, because GPR requires basically pristine ground. If it's disturbed and jumbled and there's metal there, it's virtually impossible to make any sense of what you're seeing, and you can't with any certainty say, well, there is anything worth investigating in there. So the EM helps eliminate those areas. And it's not to say that there might not be something there, it's just that we literally can't see it because of all the interference from metal and disturbance. So that's why we use those two together. And I think that's the end. Yeah. Pardon me? Okay. Yeah, and so, as it says here, even if we think there's something there, it's just a guess. And there's only one way to ever find out if anything there is there, and that's to excavate it. And that goes for any geophysics. It's always the same. It's a best guess. It's an educated guess. You know, the better your operator, the better your equipment, the better your guess. But you know, it always has to be confirmed through excavation. So we never say, like, you know, they were talking about some of the headlines from Kelowna, for example, you know, where they said the remains were found. That's not true at all. They found anomalies in the data that are similar to what graves would look like. And that's all we would ever say, because we can't say more than that. And again, if we don't detect anything, that also doesn't mean anything either. It could be that they are just, for whatever reason, non-detectable. So. Correct. No. Correct.
Right. There's two situations that we use. Like the reason we make a team is because James gives us these great baseline data that we can interpret as archaeologists. And in a cemetery setting, a group of anomalies that are in rows, that are sort of the same size, and they're parallel to the existing marked graves, we're pretty sure those are graves, but not absolutely sure those are graves. In an area that's not a cemetery, but is suspected that there's graves there, we can see anomalies that are the size and shape of graves, but we have no idea what they are. But you don't have to dig up the grave to establish the fact that it probably is a grave. The reason being is, as an archaeologist, we can shave off the topsoil and look at the shape of the hole that's been created and say, that's a grave shaft. There's probably nothing else that would make a rectangular hole of that size and shape. So you don't have to dig all the way to the bottom and disturb the remains to be reasonably sure, but without disturbing the ground at all, in an area that's not a graveyard, all we can really say is we have anomalies that are the size and shape of graves. But to reiterate, in a cemetery, you get patterns that match the existing graves. Most of the residential school cemetery work we've done is in a cemetery. Some of the graves are marked and some of them aren't. And the unmarked graves we find are right in line with the rows of the graves that are marked. So we're really sure. Plus, because it's a cemetery and it hasn't been disturbed by other construction or anything, there's always a depression. Every grave is marked with a depression. And we have to walk over top of graves, by the way, to do this work. You can always feel them with your feet. I can talk about one residential school cemetery that we have worked on because it's been in the news and we've been identified as the people that did it, so it's not us telling somebody else's story. Back in 2012, we did the geophysical survey for the Regina industrial Indian Industrial School Cemetery, just south of Regina. And on that cemetery, there was 35 unmarked graves. And we just went back last summer and marked those graves. Pasqua First Nation has a metal foundry, and they made these beautiful orange feathers that are about this big, and on them it says every child matters. And then we went back with the GPS coordinates for each of the anomalies that appeared to be graves, and we marked them. We know that it's a graveyard. There are 2 headstones in it. The 2 headstones belong to the headmaster's children. So just the 2 white children got gravestones. None of the students did. But at any rate, when we were putting the markers in the graves and going back to each of those, I could feel with my feet that I was standing in a grave, and it was a very powerful experience. And so we marked all those 35, and now they have markers. In a cemetery, we can be really certain that these anomalies and the depressions that are above these anomalies are probably graves. In a situation where we're not in a cemetery, more investigation is required to say that's probably a grave. But I don't think we would ever have to go as far as disturbing the remains if we think it's a grave. Does that make sense? The patterns mean everything, you know, rows in size and shape and how far apart they are. In fact, we get anomalies that are, in that other one we're working in, the anomalies are about 1.5 meters long and about 75 centimeters wide. They're children's graves. They're that long and they're that wide. So they're not full-sized. And the headstones in that grave, for the ones that do have headstones, range in age from 6 to 15. So, yeah, that's right, there's 4. Without naming the school, there are records, and that's another thing that we do, is look at records to try and narrow down who the children might be without disturbing them. And in March of 1937, March of 1937, in 1 month, 45 of their children died from scarlet fever. And 11 of the graves had headstones, and then they ran out and they didn't make any for the rest, so the rest were unmarked. But we found them all. We don't know their names, but we got all of the graves from that. But again, it was in a cemetery. They were in a pattern. They were buried side by side in rows, so we're pretty sure. And they were right beside the graves that were marked. So the remarkable thing that I find, if I may share this, is that the people that buried these children weren't ashamed to do it. And so they weren't hiding anything. They were just, anyway, no, I'm not going to go there. But at any rate, so in a cemetery setting, it's really obvious what are graves. Yes, yes. We've found that before, actually. Another one that I can talk about is I repatriated the remains of Chief One Arrow. He died in 1886 in Stony Mountain Penitentiary after the Northwest Resistance of 1885. He was falsely convicted of felony treason, and he died in prison. And he was buried in St. Boniface. But One Arrow, the the First Nation that's named after him wanted to repatriate his remains, and we found his remains using ground penetrating radar and using exactly the techniques here. We sorted it out from what grave. People knew how far he was buried over from Louis Riel is actually how we knew where he was. And we highlighted his grave. I never saw his remains, by the way, even though we excavated them. We excavated his whole casket and put his whole casket, soil and all, in another casket. It weighed about 800 pounds because it was completely filled with silt and clay from the Red River. But at any rate, on top of One Arrow's grave was an infant's grave. And so the spiritual leaders that I was working with said, we can't disturb, we have to bury this baby back where he or she was. And so that casket we also lifted without disturbing it. We put it in plaster, like you may have seen how they remove bones from the ground dinosaur excavations. We made a plaster jacket for this casket so we could lift it without disturbing it. And then when we did the same for One Arrow, using a plaster jacket so that we wouldn't disturb him, then we put the child's remains back in the same grave shaft. And there was two big willow roots, and they made a crucifix out of the two willow roots. They put them together, and we assumed that it felt like she was a girl. Let's say that, and we all agreed this is a baby girl. And this wasn't a residential school cemetery. This is St. Boniface Cathedral Cemetery. And we called her Willow, and we had a funeral for her. But yeah, there's oftentimes, because cemeteries run out of space, that's a really common thing to find graves on top of graves, right? And it's everywhere in Europe. When I go to my ancestors' graves in Norway, my ancestors came from Norway, funnily enough. All of the graveyards, they just stack, right? So a headstone will have a dozen names on it because they keep stacking them on top of one another because there's so little available space for graveyards. But yeah, that's a very common thing, and yeah. So you can't be sure. In this case, we didn't know there was two caskets in that grave. All we knew is there was a grave there, right? And then it was quite a surprise to find out that before we got to the big casket from 1886, a more recent burial had been put in the same place. Yeah. Yes. Well, that's a really good question. Mossy areas are full of tannic acid, and they actually preserve remains wood very well, and they preserve bone very well. In my job, I've done a lot of work repatriating remains, and you can certainly tell the difference depending on what kind of soil it is. I did work by Swan Lake, Manitoba, an Anglican cemetery there. It was huge. The cemetery was as big as this ice field, and there was about 30 people buried on one side, and there was about 20 people buried on the other, and there was two old ladies were left taking care of the whole cemetery. The church was long gone, and nobody used the cemetery anymore, but they were still mowing the grass and everything. And they said, we want to make this cemetery smaller, so we want to move some of the graves so they're closer to the other graves and desanctify most of the cemetery. And these burials were all in the 1880s and 1890s, but it was sandy soil. So there was nothing left of the wood. The caskets were just, you could tell that they had been wood, but they were just an impression of wood in the sand. On the other hand, they still had their clothes, their glasses, you know, their buttons and things like that, because the sand was helped preserve those, but it was terrible for the wood, right? So the different things we encounter are it really depend a lot, but you're right, in mossy soil the preservation would be a lot higher. You may have heard of the people they find in the muskegs in Denmark. Well, those are 4,000 or 5,000 years old. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I hope it's okay with everybody, by the way, that we're talking about human remains, by the way, because ultimately that's, you know, that's but it's entirely, we never would assume anything about doing anything that would disturb those remains without the complete direction from the community, right? And then of course there's the whole other aspect of the coroner has to be involved, the Department of Vital Statistics has to be involved, it invokes the Cemetery Act and all those things, so there's many layers of bureaucracy as well when it comes down to doing work that would be anything other than non-intrusive geophysics. So anyway, James is going to show, I mean, we have to get going to the feast pretty soon, but James is just going to show you what how this works. So James will be out on the residential school site for the next couple of weeks, walking back and forth with this thing. And I'll just, do I have a couple minutes or are we getting pretty late? 2 minutes? Okay. Don't get me started on this stuff.
You'll never stop.
Yeah. You see, the antenna here is about 1 foot wide, and James has to cover the entire ground surface with that, which means he's going to walk the full width of that site. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind when he's doing it, and it's noisy. So you'll see him walking back and forth like that. You can only take data in one direction, because if you take it in both, it'll create an interference pattern when he processes it. So then he has to walk back without taking data, and then he only moves over the width of the machine. So to do the to do the Rossville School area, by walking the whole length of it and then moving over 1 foot, and then walking back without taking data, and then moving over 1 foot and walking the other way again, it's about 400 kilometers of walking. So James will be walking from here almost back to Saskatoon. But so when you're watching him do this work, it won't look like much is getting done, but that's because it won't feel like much is getting done either. But that's because he's taking, think about it as a scanner. He's taking, instead of setting your scanner to 300 dots per inch, you're setting the scanner to 6,000 dots per inch. So he's taking as high as a possible resolution map of the ground as he can, and the reason is simply this: a child's grave isn't very big. So if you go this far apart, you could miss the grave entirely. So we have to do it that carefully. So
to give you an idea of the resolution you can get from this, though, in the original image that was up on that PowerPoint presentation, it's a black and white picture with GPR data overlaid. One of the areas I did a 25 centimeter resolution, and you could see the tractor tires imprints in the ground underneath the asphalt in the 25 centimeter resolution. In the 50 centimeter, you couldn't see it at all, but you can literally see tractor prints under the asphalt. That's how good the resolution is if you do this 25 centimeter spacing. So if you don't do it, you're probably gonna not find much. So
so when he's working with this, you'll see him walking along with that thing. There will be paint on the ground for him to have targets so he can go straight, and he will be putting flags up. And those flags don't mean anything other than he's walking towards them. He's not marking anything. So flags don't mean that there's been graves found. Would you show quickly this? The first thing James is going to do is walk around with this, but it's much quicker. This is about 8 times faster than a GPR. Yeah, and he'll be holding a GPS in his hand. And what we'll get with that is get a map of the footprint of the foundations of the school and everything, and of course, then we don't have to GPR on those because that's completely disturbed, and we wouldn't be able to read anything in there anyway. But we'll get a really good map of all of the infrastructure that's buried in the ground by doing that. So these are the 2 things you'll see James doing. Meantime, Maria's going to be here, and she'll work with Loretta and Dave and the committee to just take her marching orders on what it is you need her to do. I'm sadly have to take off tomorrow because I'm working with another First Nation on a unmarked grave project, and it has to be done before the snow flies as well. So are there any other questions? Everybody's hungry. Oh, yes. Dave, you were talking this morning about that, right? The sharing of information by survivors of where possible grave sites might be. Yeah. So that's the phase that's about to start. Yeah. Yeah.
and it might even take longer. Thanks. But at least 2 years is what we're looking at to do the site searches. The Rossville School site is what we're starting right now. We're hoping to finish before winter, and you know, based on the information we gather, along with the interviews that we're going to be doing with people, you know, that search could be expanded, but probably not going to happen this year until probably next year.
So in terms of the research, we have to hire a professional researcher that can go and do that search, at a complete search at archives and wherever else, like the diocese in it's in Nepal, right? There's different places that this information is, and somebody has to collect it all, because even like just the Rossville School site, we're looking at 70 years of operation. There were a number of years that it wasn't used because it was being rebuilt, but they had anywhere from 50 to over 100 students in 1 year. So there would be a list there, and I looked at some of the lists, and it'll have a name, and then it'll say boy or girl. So there's a lot of research, but it's part of it is like the research is making sure that we get all that information for each of the institutions and each of the year that they were in operation, with the names, if we can get them, and all the deaths, the students that came in from, all the staff as well. That's a big one, the people that were working there. So the data collection itself, it won't be limited just to former Rossville, the Rossville Residential School. It'll be done in all the schools, plus students who left Norway House to attend residential school somewhere else. And then interviews, the other one that Councillor Swanson mentioned was the interviews, interviewing survivors or family of survivors, so we could document some of their experiences. So there's a whole bunch of activities that have to take place, which supports the ground penetrating radar, or I guess if we do find anomalies, then we're going to have to look back at all the years that they were in operation, and how many kids died, and how many do we know whereabouts their burial site is. So it's, you know, it's a process. Oh, so here's the map. I don't know it, but this area in red, can you all see that? So here's if you could point to the bus garage area, and then point to the teacherages way up in that corner there. Yeah, so that's kind of what that site looks like. So at some historically, in order to open up a residential school initially, and then again when Frontier School took over, there was lands that were surrendered to the province to be administered by the province of Manitoba for educational purposes. So that area, at first it was 40 acres, and then in the late 1960s, when Frontier School Division took over, it was about 15 acres. That's this area in red. So that is not reserve, it's not part of Norway House Reserve right now. We're working on that. Councillor Swanson Wayne Anderson, Clarence Papanikis, and myself that were the project team. So the green area, if you can see, there's 2 green areas there. So that's the area where there's contamination. There's with petroleum hydrocarbons. So about 7 to 10 days of ground penetrating radar will be started there, starting tomorrow, Thursday. About 7 to 10 days, that green area will be done first. And that's so the Stantec environmental team could start doing a remedial action plan. They need that information. They need to eliminate any graves or archaeological things in order to complete a remedial action plan to excavate those contaminated soils. So after that, the gray area, that's your next phase, that would complete that whole red line area. That would mean we would, so another 20 to 25 days, and that whole red area would be GPR'd. But while we're doing that, you know, in the next couple of days, like I said, we'll have a table set up by those teepees, by that sacred fire, and we'll be there. If people have information that they can share, we're hoping that's when we'll collect it so we can map the other areas that need to be investigated. I know I did research, not really detailed, but they talk about some gardening at Hope Island and some overnight camps there. So those are the types of things we want to know, where else we might have to look in the next phase, which will likely be after, like next spring. And that's just for the Rossville School site. So we don't have maps available for the Jack River area for now. But is that, anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question about the schools. There was 2 schools, right? One burnt down, and the other one is the recent Rossville School. Are those both schools in this area here that's mapped out?
So, like I said, we're looking at the area. We're looking at this area that was surrendered, this 15 acres first. So when we get the maps out, I'm hoping that we can put those structures in that, you know, those structures that have been removed. There are some on the map. They're outlined in black hatched lines. So we want to make sure that we can identify all those structures. And yeah, you're right. Like there were 2 schools, both of which burnt down. So somebody has to do that to really put that history together too, because the story needs to come out. So we haven't gotten there yet. So we've been concentrating on this, getting this, so we can at least get this area done, and then wherever else they did, like waste disposal, gardening, if they had livestock, whatever it is, whatever it would be, that's what we gotta clarify. So, but everybody's welcome. We be out there tomorrow, like 9-ish, 10-ish. Yeah. So his question is, his understanding is that Jack River School won't be till next year. That's your question. So it won't probably be, there are limitations with the equipment, like doing this in the winter, it's not possible. So, you know, we're already at September, end of September now. But we're kind of a year behind. We could have started this last year, but COVID prevented us from from meeting. This here will take 40 days, 30 to 40, and then they got to go back and process the information that they collect, and so we would wait for a report from them. But I can't answer your question on Jack River, whether they would do it next year. It would be like, that would be determined by council, how fast we're going to move, you know. Yeah, no. I think Councillor Swanson could answer that one.
That's it. Yeah. What we're doing is that we're going to be looking at all the areas, including Jack River School. So the time frame, and we haven't set yet on when exactly we'll be doing them, but we'll be covering and we'll be doing searches there as well. Well, no, I don't know what's, the Taitian, what is the main one here, but we're doing it in different phases. And the reason why we started, as Loretta mentioned, with Rossville School was because they have to remediate the land and the manta the kasinigatik po hoise ni ma konego to simajistanwag aga sp ego gistanwag ni ma ni ma kamasinigatik ni ma in that red area pistik gistanwag ego agone you kagechike mo na minagaya gawiya me haya ko nindo ko tagyak ta tawis mastege ko nagewis tamago yago maste pito sabetege ang wis tamago nan matsiga ba peste nan, as Loretta mentioned, Hope Island by the graveyard area, Mina Church Point egute me gabit say tabinan wag sa mina so ego abetege kan po datos katsigate next summer, next year, on the Jack River School, it might be after that. Fatima. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
My name is Leonard Duncan. I grew up by Rossville School. And I remember my mom was in the residence school for about 7 years. And me and 6 of my siblings were in the residential schools out of town. But we lived close by there. And I remember that when they knocked down the Rossville School, they took out some of that dirt, but a lot of that, the cement and whatever, they took them down the bank near the pavilion. They extended the shore wano. And what I keep thinking about is I wonder if there was any bodies taken out of there and because I used to, I remember Rossville School, they had a wood furnace. And they had like wood piles, maybe the length of this and wide, about 10, 15 feet high. That's what they used to provide heat. And the other thing I was thinking about that machine I said they're going to do a demonstration. Like, over the years, I find it hard to believe, man, when outsiders come in and say, oh, this works good. I wonder if that old Rossville graveyard, if they went there, let's see if they'll see Misjednet aste graves, a lot of unmarked graves. When I was younger, and when I wasn't working, my mom always told me, "Master, it didn't matter if it was summer or winter. When my parents told me to do something, I don't question it, I go and help. And sometimes when we were digging graves, like it'd be 4 feet up frozen mud. Sometimes it took 2 days. And we did find a lot of graves. And a lot of them were they used rough lumber black for the roof. And some of the baby bodies that we found when we were digging on it, they told us to put them on the side. And there was one baby in it about that one of the guys was there, he said, that's my sister. Because the hair was still on that baby, that it was still well preserved. So I was thinking they'd be able to see and maybe they can check that pavilion area. Let's see if there's anything there. I'm a Rossville, like I remember pretty well how there was some gardens by the bus garage. There was a lot of gas and diesel fuel and all that stuff that had to be cleaned up on that side. On the other side. And my mom had told me there was 2 other schools in the field. I don't remember them. I don't think I seen them. A lot of the elders they have told their children about it, knowing that something was going to happen in the future. So it's kind of it's going to be difficult. Because I used to help with a residential school, and there was a lot of elders that spoke to me about what had happened to them. And there was a few that that asked me, they said, "Kana punta nagagayvichihachik mininwak vichihik mutsawasim sinanak nussiminanak egoni ratikota kihtawaka wasimigi." Because they were starting to talk about what happened in the residential school. And it was hard listening to them. But they were more concerned about their grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And at that time I didn't think it would be hard. About the language and the history, that sense of belonging. And I think Kagaskistano, we do it together. But we have to help each other, listen to each other. In an ask one I ho. Chief on council, I see you the Rossville committee. You can feel it. They really want to help us. Let's help them.
Thank you, Leonard. So if you have information like that, if you have stories to share, you're more than welcome to contact Loretta Moat, and tomorrow morning at the school site, if you want to come down there and join the events, we'd more than be happy to listen to what you have to say. So now we're going to go back down the bank for the feast, and we're going to get somebody to bless the food down there. Councillor Swanson.
Before we go, we got Elvis here wants to say something, and then I'll finish off here by just telling people what the other things that will be going on.
Thank you. Always in this regard, we see people those. Yahoma those in the social better than Mr. Hagen of my Tamigo, no than Shaggy baseball, get to skin again. Some of you don't understand Cree, but you'll catch on. Just like we did, we catch on. And Yahoma, let me not start with you. I give back to me go and dance. Dancing saw I give a President Twig, Darlene, my sister, Lawrence, Loppy. We saw you best share with you how their stories. Ninaga. Ninaga, my story got to start now. Starting from Jack River School. Before you Pedasket take Jack River School. Up in the second level. I got in school in. Sister Rangi Singataman, a teacher. Tabi when I did a kapisi in one. Speaking your own language. You used to get hit. Kistawaga ho si bitu na get spittiga ini. Agagi pahasto gain. Egonema. E pahasto gain. Munina ay siya pita kay simisa. Utid nama. Kay siya pita sinnik. Ang utamane pahasto gayan. Oh, but I had to keep my strength. I got a mat one. I got a muscat to gayan. Aga. Wa sumigi dostian. E siga taswan. Hiskinte antega ispaigayan. Sister South. Kaniga gitaro yan uta. Tansiyan ma Sister South ka isnaga. Ni na maina uta ka istamat na tansiya gi beisnaga. Uta uste. Monenientian ya paper. Mastanigan ya hastik. Tamudatan. Utan tu ustiamin. Nitpehi ka na mamitinin siganik. Ay ganun ako mas kayo si na mas naigay ni astig. Ay tagi school yan. Sister Ann na nagising atawa na teacher. Most of you know Sister Ann. Ay gata. Nagisigas taswan. Aga Sister Sophie Didios tayo yan. Ay gata itibiste. Abestan the Sister South. There was a padded white room. A padded white room. I got to give it to you. I got to give me do that fucking priest. I want to tell you how he. That wall. Shackles. I got to guess there. I got to give you big district. Ha. Hagam yo tomasi. That other wall, 4 was he snagana. His cost tema. Hagam no teniso. Umote an mutaman, the east. Hagam the north. Hogane, nesto, the third door. Back in 2005, yet to scan for the band. Renovations he did out in Rossville School. Renovations he did out in Rossville School. But there was a crew that was working at Sister's house. That crew happened to be checking up upstairs. I go, yeah. There was a crack up in that sister's house, up in a crack. I go, these 3 guys, they're our band members, eh? More of the dialogue, of course, they're scared to talk. Nina, mine, I'm not scared to talk, because I've been waiting for this for 50 years. 50 years as I've been suffering of this pain. Like most of you guys, you start with the rapid, it sure have a dominant effect on the ego. Sugi mahakaran. But, yeah, hey, one ima. Sister Sosan, when you tell you at Timon, I got there, and to negate it. And to negate it, when you get to Niginapiok. Ha. Kagi tu estig sa mana gigawa na gito editain bottles. Ega si tuihan miskamak.